Chapter 14, Party. Jake, Josh, and Wally sat on the wall overlooking the bench in the Remembrance Garden and watched for a beam of flashlight that would tell them the girls were coming. I can't understand it. We saw them leave the house around 8. We followed them to the cemetery. We saw them start off with the first clue before we came here. Where could they be? Peter was smart, said Josh. He said he'd rather go trick-or-treating than get even with the girls. It's a good thing he didn't come. He'd never stop complaining. Well, you're doing a pretty good job of it yourself, grumbled Jake. Maybe they got lost and decided to go back, said Wally, feeling pretty cold and tired too, and certainly ready to give up and go trick-or-treating. They had wasted enough time as it was. I don't think so. Eddie wouldn't give up that easily. They were so close. There were only 4 clues altogether. But they didn't know there were only 4. Maybe they thought they'd be here all night, said Wally. The boys sat huddled together another 3 or 4 minutes, scanning the dark cemetery for any sign of a light. Well, I don't know what happened to them, but this is a lousy way to spend Halloween. If we don't go trick-or-treating soon, people will start turning off their porch lights and won't get anything. Peter's out there getting all the candy. Maybe he'll share it, said Jake. Come on, said Wally. I'm not going to wait a whole year for Halloween to come again. You guys give up too soon, said Jake. They've got to come. 5 more minutes and then we go trick-or-treating. They waited. The wind picked up and it grew colder. And though Wally strained to see, there was no beam of light, no voices, no sound of leaves or footsteps, no snap of a twig. They've gone home, said Jake. They must have gone home. Or else they went over to Mary Ruth's and found out there wasn't any party. Hoo, boy, if that happened, they'll be ready to kill us. Jake jumped down off the wall. Okay, I give up. Let's hit all the houses we can on the way home. You and your lousy ideas, grumbled Josh. You were in on it too, Jake told them. You helped choose the invitations and you cooked the spaghetti, Wally, so don't blame it all on me. Don't remind me, said Wally. What do we do with the spaghetti and worms? He knelt down with the flashlight and lifted the lid on the saucepan, and then he gasped. There was no spaghetti, no worms. Instead, there was a little piece of paper in the bottom of the pan that read, You boys come home this instant, Mom. Jake read it, and then Josh. Oh, no! How did she find out? Said Josh. She must have missed her spaghetti. I told you we shouldn't have used the whole box, Jake. Are we ever going to catch it? Whistled Josh. But Jake wasn't so sure. Wait a minute. Think about it. I am thinking about it. We're in trouble. Somehow this doesn't sound like Mom, Jake went on. Yes, it does, said Wally. Jake shook his head. Mom would say, You boys come home this minute. Did you ever hear her say this instant? And when she leaves us a note, she uses those little notepads from the hardware store, not a piece of yellow tablet paper. Also, she never prints, and this note is printed instead of written. Wally looked at Josh, Jake. Them? They cried. Them. They're trying to ruin our Halloween. Somehow they found out what we were up to, and they figure we'll go right home and confess everything and lose out on trick-or-treating. Wally felt an enormous burden lifted off his chest. Then we don't have to go straight home. Of course not. Somebody's got to carry the pan, but there's still time to hit a lot of houses. Wally carried the pan. They headed for the cemetery entrance and the first row of houses just beyond. Where are your costumes? One woman asked. You boys don't look like trick-or-treaters to me. But she gave them candy anyway. The pickings were slim, however. Some people had already turned off their lights. Some houses had run out of candy, and still others were down to little boxes of raisins and pennies. The dentist was even giving out apples instead of candy. Desperate, they fanned out, trying to ring as many doorbells as possible. Sometimes Wally knew when you were the last one to come by, people dropped all the remaining candy in your bag. But it wasn't happening now, and he had to work twice as hard to run twice as fast to fill up even his pockets. They met again on the corner, and by 20 after 9, there were no more porch lights on anywhere. A policeman cruising by stopped when he saw them and rolled down the window. You fellas better get on home now, he called. Silently, glumly, Jake and Josh and Wally turned toward home, with barely enough candy to carry in their jackets. Mother always said that Halloween candy should last all year, and they had hardly picked up enough to last through December. You know what I'm thinking, Jake said as they turned up the street. maybe it's time we called a truce. I mean, just give up bugging the girls. Forget about them. Find other guys at school to hang around with. Whether the Malloys stay here or not probably doesn't have anything to do with what the Bensons decide. Those girls have ruined enough things for us. This Halloween was really the pits. I've been trying to tell you that, said Wally. I'm getting a little tired of the Malloys this and the Malloys that. Everything we do practically is connected to the Malloys. Okay, said Jake. As of right now, we just forget about them. They can go, they can stay. Doesn't make us any difference. I feel better already, said Wally. So do I. They went up the steps. We should have done this long ago, said Jake. We're free. Back to boy stuff again, he said. Josh smiled. Wally smiled. They opened the door. There in the living room sat Eddie, Beth, and Caroline in their costumes, as well as Peter in the pajamas, a ring of chocolate around his mouth. Mrs. Hatford hurried toward the boys. Where in the world have you been? She asked. And for a minute, Wally thought she was going to sail right past them and out the door. Why did you invite these girls to a party and then not even have the decency to show up? You didn't even mention it to me. A party? Cried Jake and Josh and Wally together. But before they could say another word, the girls all chanted together. Little Witch has come to say ghosts and goblins like to play. Won't you come and join the fun? There'll be treats for everyone. Jake, I want you to take your money and run to the store for some Cokes or something. Josh, you're in charge of games, Mrs. Hatford said. And as Wally watched helplessly, his mother took all the candy they had collected, dumped it in a bowl, and passed it around the room for starters.